Hi, and thank you for joining Equination.net's weekly update. I'm your host, Jacqueline Wyatt, and I'm very excited to be kicking off the very first ever episode in this series. Each Monday, I'll be covering a wide range of topics, and I welcome everyone to share your comments, questions, requests, and feedback through the many channels that I have available. So we have the support center, the message boards, private message, Facebook, or you can just email me. In today's episode, we're going to review some of the graded stakes from last weekend, take a look at some of the upcoming races this weekend. We'll also cover some key milestones in the game, some technical updates, as well as cover some tips and tricks. So let's dive right in. And I do apologize in advance if I mispronounce any names. Please feel free to reach out and correct me. So last weekend we had the running of the Equination.net Oaks, as well as the Equination.net Derby. And each of these races kicked off their respective Triple Tiara and Triple Crown series. In the Oaks, which is for 3-year-old fillies, we had a shockingly close finish. There were literally whiskers separating the top two finishers. But taking home the top prize was Rockin' Russian, and this is a homebred from the Ron Racing, who earned a 125.75 rating and edged out She's a Force, who earned a 125.73 rating for owner and breeder Desmond Lee too. What's really exciting about the winner too is that Rockin' Russian prefers races from 1 mile and 3/16 to 1 mile and 7/16. And this means that she's going to be well suited for both the Sunshine Stakes and will be only a 16th off of her preferences for the Daisy Cup, making her a solid contender in her bid for a Triple Tiara sweep. Another interesting thing to note though is that She's a Force was racing a 16th out of her preference in the Oaks. She only likes races that are up to 1 mile and 3/16, and this one was 1 mile and a quarter. So if she comes back for a rematch with Rockin' Russian in the Sunshine, we're definitely going to see a tough matchup. Now the Derby runs the same distance as the Oaks, but it's open to all genders and offers a much larger purse at $1.25 million. Coming off of a really strong second place finish in the Silver Platter Stakes a couple weeks ago, Karate Tail really brought his A game to win the Derby by 3/4 of a length. He earned a 128.7 rating for his effort. Despite the muddy going, the Foxstone Farm homebred closed really well to snatch the lead in the final strides from pace setter My Undivided Attention, who finished second with a 128 rating. Now, My Undivided Attention won the Wild and Handsome Classic prep race in his last start for owner and breeder Mile High Lodge. And his graded race record is very impressive, as he also finished second in the Turf Club Juvenile last season. It'll be interesting to see how Karate Tail progresses through the Triple Crown, as the final duel may be a bit beyond his capabilities. But third place finisher Catwalk Model from CO International 3 looks like a really strong candidate for the Classic, with preferences stretching to 1.5 miles, and will probably be one to watch in that race. There were quite a few other stake races this past weekend with winners of note. So in the Orchid Stakes, which is a Grade 2 event for 3-year-old fillies running 1 mile and 5/8 on the grass, another swift day put in a very swift performance for McDiarmid Racing to score her victory with an impressive 126.45 rating. In the Z Serendipity Stakes, a marathon turf Grade 3 race for older mares, OT Luke Rhodes dominated with a 3-length win for Desmond Lee 2 with a 125.36 rating. In the Equination.net Turf Marathon, Port Plymouth romped to victory with a 129 rating for owner AMS Racing Stable, winning by almost 2 lengths. Last but not least was the Royal Wing Stakes. This is a 1 mile and 3/4 turf race for older horses owned by second-tier premium members. This one was a photo finish between Papper Lapat from March Farm and Catch and Release from Lois Hills Farm. These veterans show they still have plenty of grit, and they duked it out down the stretch, scoring a 124.75 rating and 124.74 rating respectively. Very close finish. So coming up this weekend, we have the first jewels of the Turf Triple Tiara and the Turf Triple Crown. The Equination.net Turf Oaks is a Grade 1 race for 3-year-old fillies that'll run 1.25 miles on the grass, and the Derby is the equivalent for open genders. So in the Oaks, we're certainly going to have our eyes on Last Call. This one's the Peeny Stakes winner from Wildcat Stable. She was a very decisive winner in that prep, with a 1.5-length win and a 126.06 rating, which isn't even her highest rating that she's earned to date. So she's broken the 127 mark before. The only thing that she'll need to overcome, though, is a little bit of a firmer surface than she's used to. No Chance on the Street will be another one to watch for in this race, and this is a Foxstone Farm filly that exits a second place finish in the Peeny Stakes as well, just behind Last Call. She ran exceptionally well on the soggy going, despite having a preference for a nice firm course. Always a heavy hitter in these races, though. Desmond Lee, too, has an entry in here by the name of Night Murmurs, and that one's likely primed for a really solid effort here. While she didn't run in the Peeny Stakes, she did take the Cast and Stony Mile Stakes when she was a 2-year-old, and she's capable of some pretty high ratings. Over in the Turf Derby, we have Carnation Classic winner No Word in the spotlight. This horse is owned by Darkwater and was bred by Dust Devil Ranch. He earned his highest rating of 129 in that prep race to win by a length. The going should be the same this weekend as it was in the Carnation, and provided he doesn't bounce off of that really big effort, he'll be a tough one to catch here. A sense of impressive is one to really watch in this race here. He's owned and trained by AAA Horse Stable and was bred by Solinas Acres. He won the Sawgrass Juvenile as a 2-year-old with a 129.7 rating, and you'll have some of the same stars aligning for this race as he did that day, making him a really serious contender for this race. We also have 2 credit stake races this weekend with the Abridged Classic and the Double Mile Stakes, as well as the After Colony Classic, the Avanti at War Stakes, and the EQ Express Stakes. Let's move on to highlight a key milestone that's always exciting to hit once we reach the 15th day of a new season. The first 120 rated 2-year-old. So as of today, we're up to 5 2-year-olds that have scored a 120 rating or higher, and the very first one of the season came from Canadian Racer, and this horse is named Goodness Gracious. He's a colt by Swift Villain out of Glenelg. That one's a tough one. And earned a 120.73 rating on January 21st. He was placed up for sale shortly after and was purchased by Desmond Lee II for 12 credits. Secretariat, owned and bred by American Fields, which comes from the same user as Canadian Racer, earned a 120.76 rating the following day on the 22nd. This colt was also joined by another from Damar Morning Stables called Cotswold Hills, who notched a 120.41 rating on that day. Gold lived up to his name on the 25th for Excel Stable, also the same user that owns Canadian Racer and American Fields, and he romped with a 121.71 rating. Whatever Excel is feeding their horses is clearly working. Making his second start of the season, Foolproof became the top-rated 2-year-old and the 5th one to break the 120 barrier when he earned a 122.77 rated victory for owner and breeder Elantra Acres. Congratulations to these 5 owners and their youngsters. Let's move on now to technical updates. There are a lot of technical updates and new features that are in the works behind the scenes at Equination, and in this segment I'm going to touch on one of the new features that was just introduced this past weekend, and that's an updated Hall of Fame. So up to this point, we really haven't had a formal process for the Hall of Fame, and updates were, well, inconsistent at best. So to resolve that, and an enormous thank you to the folks over at Harness Nation for helping put this together, I'm really excited to set out some guidelines, categories, eligibility requirements, and rules for induction into the Hall of Fame. So you can visit the Hall of Fame in the News and Standings menu in the game for more details, but here they are in a nutshell. There will be many different categories for which a horse or stable can be inducted into the Hall of Fame under. And this includes various racing and breeding categories, and each has its own point structure and minimum total point requirements. So horses and stables will be awarded for milestones and accomplishments throughout their careers, and once they've earned the minimum required points for that given category, they can then be nominated into the Hall of Fame, and they can be nominated in by yourself or by another user. There's an easy form that you can use on the Hall of Fame page to actually nominate these horses and stables. And then during the first week of each season, we'll induct the top 5 horses and stables by points within each of those categories. If a horse doesn't make the cut in a given season, because I'm sure we're going to get lots of great nominations, the nomination will stay in the system and they'll have a chance at making the Hall of Fame in subsequent seasons. So this is still in its early stages and there's still some more tweaks and updates to come, but I'm super excited about this program and I look forward to seeing those nominations and seeing our first cohort of nominees make their way into the Hall of Fame at the start of next season. For more updates, especially on more the minor updates and bug fixes and things like that, be sure to check out the message boards in the game. I have a thread that I try to keep as up to date as possible with changes and fixes throughout the game as I go along. Now let's move into the final segment, which is tips and tricks. And in this week's tips and tricks segment, I'm going to touch on a couple of things that have come up in the chat recently, and I know they can cause some second guessing and uncertainty on a regular basis. The first is how to approach horses that have no or very minimal training, and the second is about handling those early workouts and fluctuations that we see with our 2-year-olds. So let's say you've had a bit of a hiatus from the game, you come back and your horses missed their yearling training, or missed maybe their yearling and their 2-year-old training, or more. Or you find a nice find on the sales boards, but nobody's trained it. What do you do? Is that a lost cause at this point? You might think that it is, but it's certainly not the case. These horses still have the ability to reach their full potential, but you're going to have to train and race them to get there, and it might take a little bit of time, and you'll need a little bit of elbow grease as well. So if you're interested in helping these horses reach their potential, my recommendation is to jump into training them with handily workouts. I would personally give them a 2 furlong workout to start out, and then graduate up to the 4 furlong next time out, and just keep going from there. You're going to likely see a lot of fluctuations in their workout ratings, and those numbers will probably be on the low side to start as well. But in time, you'll be able to start seeing some improvements with them, especially after the first 5 or so workouts. So just remember that form isn't important unless you're racing the horse right away. And if your injury risk starts to get into the red, you want to give them an average jog to bring that down. Handily workouts are the best way to help your horse build the muscle and skills that he needs to start earning those better workouts and eventually race ratings. Now about those fluctuations, that's something that we see every season. And why is that? Well, the simple answer is that they're growing and developing youngsters, and they're just figuring things out. Now I could dive into a super long explanation about this, but here's the gist of it. So while their invisible stats are improving from the workouts, their form is playing a big role in swaying that workout rating. So don't pay too much attention to those peaks and valleys early on. It doesn't mean that your horse is a dud by any means. It's all quite superficial, to be frank. And you should just carry on with your training program and see how their workouts progress over a longer period of time. Basically, it's completely normal for them to drop every other workout or so don't worry too much about it. Just keep carrying on, and they'll figure things out in time and start improving overall. Also, remember that you don't need to worry about form until they're ready to race. So if you're not aiming for a race anytime soon, take advantage of that and give them some more impactful workouts, handily workouts, than worrying about improving and maintaining that form. Hopefully that helps. I hope all of you have enjoyed this week's Equination.net weekly update. If you have any questions, feedback, concerns, requests, or anything really, please feel free to reach out to me via the support center, message boards, private messages, Facebook, email, you name it. It's pretty easy to get in touch with me. And I'd love to hear from you. So as a thank you for taking the time to listen to our very first episode, I'm offering a 20% discount this week using promo code PODCAST. Just enter that into checkout and claim your discount when you're buying your Equination.net credits. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you'll tune in again next week. Until then, best of luck in the races.